Yes, hello. My name is Gerald Belsky, and myself and Michael Billington of EIR are going to do an interview with Dr. Shah Mohammad, who has been a longtime member of the Board of Governors of the Afghanistan Bank, the Afghanistan Central Bank. Dr. Mehrabi, could you tell us something about your background and your relationship and the relationship of the current bank, Central Bank of Afghanistan, for which you are a board member, and the relationship to the current Taliban government?
Thank you, Jerry, and I want to thank also the Schiller Institute for all their efforts to be able to make a difference in releasing the Afghan reserve and to be able to get a positive result in eradicating the poverty that has ensued and will continue unless concrete measures are taken by the United States and European countries who at this stage hold the Afghanistan Foreign Reserve overall. Now, I'm an economist. As an economist, I have spent close to 20 years on the governing board of the Central Bank of Afghanistan. I also served on the fiscal side as a senior economic advisor for the ministers of finance, two different ministers of finance, and worked on generating revenue and also dealt with government spending when I was at the Ministry of Finance. But while I was at the Ministry of Finance, I continued my role as a member of the Supreme Council of the Central Bank, which is, again, a board very similar to that of Federal Reserve Bank of United States. It consists of 7 board members, and I'm also chairman of the Audit Committee of the Central Bank of Afghanistan. So I have been extremely active in trying to bring reform, as we did when I went back, when I was first invited to Afghanistan, and tried to reform the financial institution, and more specifically to at least make certain that we have a functioning and effective central bank. Because the central bank prior to 2003 and 2004 had a dual function. It was both a commercial bank and also government bank. And that function of commercial bank was given to the newly created commercial banks, and Central Bank of Afghanistan as an independent entity was structured and started its function in the early 2003, 2004, and 2005.
Thank you, Dr. Mehrabi. So the main subject that you have been dealing with, and we, is that the U.S. Federal Reserve and several European banks have $9.5 billion in reserves, which belong to the Afghan Central Bank. This money does not belong to the banks that are holding them, but it's being frozen for political reasons and disagreements with the new government in Kabul, which makes it essentially a form of illegal economic warfare. Could you describe the impact of this on the people of Afghanistan and what actions you have taken to attempt to free these funds?
Thank you, Mike. Again, here is an important point about freezing Afghan foreign exchange reserve. It has contributed to economic instability. And that I predicted back in September. I predicted a number of things would occur, and they all have come into being because now there's a data to substantiate what I had already predicted in September. At that time, I said that indeed that my predictions that, as I said to you, they have already materialized. I predicted the currency will depreciate. It has depreciated, and it has appreciated more than 14% since August. I also predicted that the food prices will increase and they will go to double digit. And double digit has occurred. When you look at the prices of food, wheat has gone up by more than 20%, flour has gone up by over 30%, and then cooking oil has gone up by 60%, and gasoline has gone up by 74%. So in banking sector, I also said at that time needs liquidity. And to be able to, liquidity is very important. Reserve, it must be released, I said, to stabilize prices and to prevent further collapse of Afghani, which is the national currency. And when you look at those particular situations, I also argued that at that time that as we see here is that Afghani that has depreciated, as I said to you, about 14%. And at the top of it was that this currency depreciation has hits mostly consumer purchasing power. And what it does here is that it puts people in a position where they cannot buy the basic necessity of life. And also, as I said to you, prices of all these goods have gone up. Also, but I said here that imports will decline, and that has occurred. There was a reduction in demand for these imported goods, and the consumption has declined significantly because people have no access to their own money in the bank. In the top of it, they don't have jobs. So many lost jobs, they did not earn any income, and then higher prices further suppress the demand for buying any goods and services. So and then that's what you see, the whole hunger and starvation that has come into being. But I also would have said that trade clearly is not taking place. As a matter of fact, Pakistan imports from Pakistan were 46% lower than during the same period last year. Exports are very meager exports in the dry fruit and carpets and so on. That has remained somewhat stable, but not been generating adequate foreign exchange reserve. So you have got wages that are declined. So getting back to the notion of the impact of this freezing on Afghanistan is what we already see that has created immense poverty. So what I propose that we should allow Central Bank of Afghanistan limited, monitored, and conditional access to their own reserve. This is Afghanistan reserve. It does not belong to anybody else but to Afghan people. They should be allowed to have access to their reserve. And this foreign exchange reserve should be used for the purpose of auctioning off. Why? Because auctioning is designed to prevent the depreciation of Afghani against the dollar and other foreign currencies, and also to increase the purchasing power of Afghanis, and then prevent it further from decline, as it's declining day in and day out. So the Central Bank of Afghanistan will not be able to maintain domestic price stability without auctioning, and price stability would not come into being unless these reserves are released. And one of the main functions of Central Bank of Afghanistan is to have and maintain price stability, and that they cannot do. So what I suggested at that time, and still suggest, that access to 150 million to, now I'm saying 200 because the reserves have dwindled significantly per month out of the 7.1 billion, which is roughly half of the reserve that DAP auctions off monthly, that should be given to DAP to stabilize the economy. So I also said that United States will be able to verify that these funds are used exclusively for the purpose of stabilizing the currency. The auctions are conducted electronically, and the transactions between the central bank and commercial banks are automatically recorded. So, but in addition to this, I suggested that the use of fund should be, could be audited, this one point I say, by international auditing firm that is currently operating in Afghanistan. Now, if there's any misappropriation, then they could cut off the funds. An important point here is that we want to be able to try to use the fund to prop up the value of the Afghani and to allow people to buy the essential goods and services. I've got people who call me constantly that they cannot afford to buy bread, which is the main staple for Afghans. I have got my own brother who is dean at the university. He's been paid. He has income, but he cannot afford to, without our help, to remittances, that he is not able to purchase the basic necessity of life. And there are many other Afghans who are constantly talking about the fact that they cannot buy ordinary Afghans. So we need to be able to help meet the needs of ordinary Afghans because of, again, higher prices of foods. And that can be handled without any difficulty by allowing these reserves to go ahead and be released. But the important point also is that we know, based on empirical evidence of what we have done in the past with regard to a release of the funds, every time that we went and engaged in auction, we were able to stabilize the currency and move to price stability. As a matter of fact, the record of central bank is very clear that central bank was able to maintain a single-digit increase in the prices for most of these 2 decades. And that, to further at least look at empirical evidence, Taliban, just about 3 weeks ago, they auctioned off 2.5 million out of the 10 million they had proposed to auction. And that auctioning off during the same day resulted in appreciation of the currency. The value of Afghani went up. And then it stayed there, went up for 2 days, and then 2.5 million is not adequate. The central bank has to intervene continuously to be able to maintain this price stability. If they don't do it, you got the crisis that you see right now, higher prices, people are going to be starved to death, and then famine is going to come as a result of drought as well, and people are going to go ahead and move out of Afghanistan, and they would be banging the European doors.
Well, Dr. Mehrabi, at a forum sponsored by the Center for Global Development about a month ago or so, you proposed a partial lifting of the sanctions and a partial lifting of the freeze on funds to allow the Afghan central bank to access about 150 million a month to engage in dollar auctions, as you just described, to stabilize the value of the currency. We think, however, that this would allow this partial lifting these Western countries that are holding the funds to justify their continued holding of Afghan funds, which, as you've said, they have no moral or legal right to do so. Wouldn't you agree that they must release all the funds as a matter of principle and moral obligation?
I think United's, with regard to sanction, I have said also United States Treasury needs to clarify and modify sanctions law. I think to me, its legality is not clear in my mind. Whether legally can they go ahead and withhold another country's reserve? So that needs to be clarified. And also what I've said here, that they have shown some degree of flexibility in the area of humanitarian aid, but it has to be broader than humanitarian exemptions. Broader would include these sanctions that to be lifted with regard to release of these particular reserve. Because again, these reserve belongs to Afghans, and I think we need to be able to provide an opportunity for our merchants, our traders, to engage in trade. And they were not going to engage in trade unless they are released. And as I said to you again before, there are concerns from the Treasury Department about terrorism financing and sanctions, and others have raised the issue regarding the competency of government and its leaders. I think all of those issues can be discussed with active engagement, and then release of these funds on a monthly basis with the verification that I have said. There's no mistake that can be made here that that the collapse of the economy would come into being unless these reserves are addressed, addressed on a systematically monthly basis. We have a lot of models that United States in the past have used. Iran had allowed release of funds to be used for the purpose of trade, and they could use that as well. So the OFAC, that is Office of Foreign Asset Control, will have to allow some degree of flexibility to be able to make certain that exceptions are made, not only as it's made for humanitarian related issues, but also for allowing central bank to get access to their reserves. I think you cannot go ahead and punish Afghans. Afghans, we talk about issues of women and so on. Women and children are going to be the first people who are going to be suffering from this. They will not be able to buy goods and services. You know, on the one hand, if we argue that we want to go ahead and provide humanitarian aid, you could not automatically say, listen, we are going to go ahead and choke off the economy as well. There's two opposite arguments. The arguments do not really make sense in a way that on the one hand, you say, I want to help humanitarian. On the other hand, I'm going to choke off the economy so that the ordinary Afghans will not be able to have access to foods and basic necessities.
Well, you've answered really the next question implicitly, but I'm going to ask it anyway, which is the World Bank, as you know, is now planning to restore about 230 million in aid. But even this small amount, they're saying, has to go through UNICEF and the World Health Organization instead of going through the Afghan banking system. What is your view of this?
I don't know where UNICEF is going to use it for what purposes. I said that before, or WHO. I think, and also even the World Food Program, if they are done and for the purpose of purchasing grains and other basic necessities, that is good, but humanitarian aid is not a solution to rekindling the activities of the economy. Humanitarian aid, as I have said all along before, well, it's necessary, but it is not, it's a short gap measure, and it's not the complete measures of trying to get the economy overall move to a point where they could go ahead and get an increase in aggregate demand, which is very essential if the economy is going to go ahead and function and generate enough revenue for daily economic activity.
One of the sanctions, or some of the sanctions, have, as I understand it, denied Afghanistan access to the SWIFT money transaction system. What is the impact of this on the country?
Well, this is what also commercial banks have been complaining about. You know, they wanted, commercial banks had a window where they could go ahead and engage in corresponding banks, and that has been stopped, so that indeed they cannot go ahead and engage with their correspondent bank that they had relationship with, but that has been blocked by Treasury. The Treasury Department would not allow, in the banks, the correspondent banks, they are hesitant and reluctant to engage in any activity unless they get a clearance from Treasury. And that's what I said before, that unless the Treasury relaxes and shows some degree of flexibility, and allow some exemptions from sanctions and other exemptions that will have to be provided for these banks, and allow the SWIFT entity to go ahead and allow the transaction to take place. We're going to, again, going back to the same situation, liquidity is not going to be there. We're going to be choking off the economy overall.
Dr. Mehrabi, there's been a recognition by many individuals and organizations that the point you're making, that humanitarian aid will not work if there's no banking system. Mm-hmm. However, one individual has floated a proposal, Alex Zerdin, who was the former financial attaché for the Treasury Department in 2019 in Kabul. He's put forward a proposal that may be being discussed behind the scenes, but his proposal is to bypass the central bank in order to avoid giving money to the current government, and to set up a private central bank, or to use a commercial bank like the Afghanistan International Bank or some other bank, through which they can channel some of these funds which are being illegally held. But it is the proposal is to set up a private bank that would carry out some of the functions you've described, such as the auctioning of money to prop up the currency. But what is your view of this idea of setting up a private central bank to bypass the current central bank?
Well, again, it goes back to we have invested about 20 years in modernizing or in establishing a central bank that is able to administratively and based on the DAB law perform all the functions that the central bank is to perform. That is including, obviously, you're looking at supervision of the central bank, issuing of banknotes, and being able to be the lender of last resort and to provide liquidity to the commercial banks. Those functions cannot be taken over by a commercial bank. Commercial bank is there to be able to earn profit, while central bank is main function is not profitability. So here, and also a commercial bank cannot be relegated with the responsibility of central bank. Central bank has got personnel that are well trained, that they have education and experience, that they could go ahead and perform all their particular duties based on the law that is still not revised, that still isn't practiced. And that, I think, to allow another entity, or to say that to have a parallel institution is to a great extent is going to result in a situation where it will create a lot of confusion, and it will in one way or another, it will result in the credibility of the central bank to be eroded in the mind of a public at large. And when public cannot trust, and when they don't trust, you have to keep in mind the issue of currency is the domain of the central bank. It is not that is Afghani. It is not a commercial bank who can go ahead and issue the currency. And currency as a medium of exchange is accepted because people trust that particular currency to use it as a medium of exchange or store of value, and use it as a unit of account. That cannot come from commercial bank. Commercial bank does not have the authority, legally or otherwise, to be able to engage in issuing currency or inject liquidity of Afghani into the system. Remember, here it's not only USD, it is also Afghanistan currency that is also an important element in bringing about liquidity into the economy. So it is establishing a parallel institution, if it's designed for dismantling the economy and dismantling the central bank, as some of these people have advocated, is not a move that will rescue the poor people in ordinary Afghans from the misery that they are, that out of no fault of their own, experiencing now.
The UN has addressed the crisis in the banking system. The U.S. Special Representative for Afghanistan, Deborah Lyons, gave a report to the UN Security Council on November 17th, which said, quote, "The dire humanitarian situation in the country is preventable, as it is largely due to financial sanctions that have paralyzed the economy." And then also the UN Development Program said in November that the commercial banking system is critical to continue even the humanitarian and other basic programs that are supported by the UN and some of the NGOs and other partners. So the economic cost of a banking system collapse with the concomitant negative social consequences would be colossal. That's what the UN Development Program said. Has the UN taken any significant actions to stop this disaster, which they are describing?
Okay, well, I think that's a good question. Let's look at what, I want to mention also that UNAMA is United Nations, it is, we call it's United Nations Assistance Mission in Afghanistan. They were able to bring 16 million in cash, but it was a part of the humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. So they have taken that measure. Even UNAMA does not have a very good record in the mind of many Afghans. Their record of performance in the past as far as efficiency, credibility, and accountability is concerned. But anyway, that 16 million has been brought in twice. So there have been about 32 million in cash were brought, but mostly, almost all of it was directed toward humanitarian aid to Afghanistan. And it was not brought into the central bank. This is, again, while UN clearly it talks about the collapse of the system, and I think in talking about a financial sector, in the constraint that a financial sector is faced with, and realizes that liquidity, both at a commercial bank and central bank, have been eroded, but still has not taken enough measures to be able to address the channeling of these funds through central bank and for the purpose of auctioning. So, I think it's one thing when we say talk the talk, but walk the walk, I think is an issue that needs to be brought up at this position. But the statement by the UN Special Representative that have been made clearly realizes and understand that the banking system collapse could come into being, but you have to take concrete measures to prevent the bank collapsing. And what do you do in this case? It is not going to happen by only addressing humanitarian aid. The firms and households, they will be unable to access bank deposit. They are not able to get the access to a full bank deposit right now to begin with, because we have got, central bank has put strict limit on it because they don't have enough liquidity in the system. So, so when you look at these international transactions that was mentioned again before toward SWIFT and all that, that has been blocked to a great extent. Firms are unable to transfer funds overseas. They cannot transfer funds overseas for import to pay for the imports. So when you look at it, bottlenecks are created in every direction that you can conceivably think of. So in the outlook, obviously, is very bleak unless measures are taken by the United States, in this case, to release these particular funds and to allow UNAMA to be able to channel these funds to central bank, rather than allowing a parallel institution to perform the central bank function. The central bank have enough personnel to go ahead and perform all their main functions, in this case, price stability, and they will intervene, they will reduce depreciation of the currency, but at this stage, the depletion of international reserve has created a quagmire here, and there's a lot of fragmentation over the financial sector. Traders have got a very difficult time because they cannot go ahead and get access to these particular funds. So I would hope that indeed the UN Special Representative would clearly look at what we have suggested in this case, and look at that, in a very simple thing, economists usually look at the cost and benefit. Look at what is the cost of collapse of the banking system, and what are the benefit of making certain that that is rescued. How much would that is Europe and the United States would gain by making certain that economy functions in a normal way by allowing them to have access to their reserve, and then also inject other liquidity in terms of cash to people who were funded by ERTF. ERTF has a lot of fund, and that could be used for the salary of these people who have not been paid, so that when they have the salary, that they could go ahead and spend it in order to buy goods and services. And that will help that this aggregate demand or total demand would be activated, and economy will be able to multiplier effect generate economic growth.
Jerry?
Well, Dr. Mehrabi, you have been meeting with members of the Congress to urge them to call on President Biden to release the Afghan assets. And I know that a letter is being circulated. In fact, I received an email from the Maryland Peace Action Group, and I know peace action groups all over the United States are circulating an appeal to people to call on their congressman to sign on to this letter. But a letter is being circulated by Representatives Jayapal, Sarah Jacobs, and Yezu Garcia to urge President Biden to release the $9.5 billion in frozen Afghan reserves. What can you say about your efforts in the Congress and with the news media to promote this policy?
Thank you. Now, this letter is an effort. We jointly wrote this particular letter back in, I think it was in October. And then the Congress was very busy. Our meeting continued with congressmen and senators. And through those meeting and efforts, we were able to get a number of sponsors for this particular letter. Now, so far, we have about 23 people who have signed it as of now, 23. So it's initially, Jayapal and Jacobs and Garcia signed it, but now we have other Congress members who have joined the bandwagon, and they have signed it. Our expectation and hope is, and I had a meeting today again at the meeting for the staff of Congress, that they attended a joint meeting of the staff of Congress and Senate, and made a presentation and pitched this whole notion of this letter and signature by more people than what we had. As I said, we have 23. We were hoping to go ahead and get more signature, and then this letter would be presented to President Biden. And we in the letter is about 2-page letter. We are highlighting what needs to be done and why it should be done, and how important it is to make certain that people in Afghanistan are not going to suffer from starvation, and to make certain that we do not have famine and universal poverty, and this is in the national interest of the United States. So the argument has been made that that United States has poured a lot of sweat and financial resources into making certain that these institutions are established. And now we should not be in a position of dismantling these particular institutions. And the Afghans deserve to have access to their particular, the Afghans, or to their reserve. They deserve to have a life that live in a peace and prosperity in a country that has suffered from 40 years of war. So all those arguments are clearly spelled out in the letter to President Biden, and it will be submitted to President Biden soon, most likely on Monday or Tuesday of next week.
Thank you. Helga Zepp-LaRouche, as you know, the founder of the International Schiller Institute, stands very strongly against this policy of genocide that's being waged against Afghanistan by the US and the allied NATO nations. What is needed beyond the immediate aid, she insists, is the launching of a modern healthcare system with all that that entails, meaning clean water, electricity, transportation, as well as the medical facilities. Helga Zepp-LaRouche has called this project for international cooperation Operation Ibn Sina, after the famous 11th century medical genius, as well as the poet, astronomer, philosopher, who was in fact born in the region of today's Afghanistan and is much beloved across the entire Islamic world. What do you think about this effort, and what can you say about Ibn Sina?
I think, thank you for the question again. Here is that we're looking at the current Afghanistan, a collapse of a government that is coming into being. And Afghanistan is faced with economic and development challenges, and daunting economic and political challenges. So any effort to bring about development and to be able to bring economic growth is welcome. I think the effort by Ms. LaRouche in terms of making certain that the health issues for Afghanistan, which had a very high mortality rate, is a move that will at least expand the life of many of those people who are suffering from shortened life because of the ailments that they suffer from and not having access to healthcare. I think, and also obviously water, clean water, and access to water and electricity that right now Afghanistan cannot imports a lot of electricity and cannot pay for it because of, again, shortage of currency. Those are all in medical facilities being made available, I think, are all the moves that we should all support, and we should all be able to, at least in one form or another, be very appreciative of it also. Now, in the health area, Afghanistan experienced a third COVID-19 wave that started back in April. So when you look at it, infection rates really reached very high level. When you look at it, when you look at case of health, I think these when you look at the health situation, and then you are couple that with a drop in foreign aid, and then drop in government not being able to generate enough money to address the health issues, and at the top of it, World Bank, which paid for the employee of health sector, they stopped that payment. All of those combined is really brought about a catastrophic situation for the economy of Afghanistan. So a move by Ms. LaRouche is a welcome move. And I think Ibn Sina obviously is, as you mentioned clearly, that he is well known in that part of the region as well as in Afghanistan. And I said to you, I think I said before that Ibn Sina's hospital is right in the heart of Kabul, in the heart of Kabul that many patients actually visit, and in modernizing that particular institution with the help of Ms. LaRouche and others also would be highly valued and appreciated as well.
The other major issue which we in the Schiller Institute and EIR have promoted is for large-scale infrastructure development, especially with the help of Belt and Road. We've just learned that Pakistan has now begun constructing a rail connection from Quetta to Kandahar. And we know that starting last February, there was a plan approved between Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Kazakhstan, and not Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, to develop a rail link from the China-Pakistan Economic Development Corridor from Islamabad through the Khyber Pass into Kabul and then on to Tashkent as part of the Belt and Road, which would give all of the Central Asian countries access to the Arabian Sea for the first time, and also transform Afghanistan. What is your vision for Afghanistan's development? And do you think it's possible that these projects can continue without fixing the banking crisis first, and getting cooperation from China and other neighboring countries?
I think we should move in the direction of, as I said to you before, that beside humanitarian aid, this Belt and Road Initiative for China could provide Afghanistan with long-term economic viability. I think that is an important point to keep in mind. One possibility is obviously Afghanistan joining the China-Pakistan economic corridor. Which is a center part of that Belt and Road Initiative, that Beijing, I think, has pledged over, I don't know how much, I think it's over 60 billion for infrastructure in Pakistan. And I think initially Afghanistan was not allowed to be a part of it, and now I think it's been invited to be a part of it. I think this initiative by CPEC, China-Pakistan Corridor, I think is a good option for the development of Afghanistan. And now also, I think it's important to keep in mind that when you talk about we talk also about the Turkmenistan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and India natural gas pipeline is important. Taipei, that could generate quite a bit of money for Afghanistan also. Transit free, I think somewhere around, it's been projected about over $400 million. And this pipeline clearly is an important one. But we also, on top of the other areas for the development purposes that has been addressed or talked about, but has not been fully explored and materialized yet, is the mineral. That copper mine that when I was in Afghanistan, the Ministry of Finance, INAC copper mine in 2008, the contract was signed with China, that is metallurgical cooperation of China, that because of the security situation, has not really, was not able to go ahead and produce much. Then we have got this Hajigak iron ore is an important one to explore. Then oil basin we have that China is trying to explore as well. So there are many other opportunities. Also Afghanistan has a large reserve of lithium beside other minerals that could be generating quite a bit of foreign exchange reserve if these are all activated.
Well, Dr. Mehrabi, are there any other thoughts that you would like to convey?
Well, I'm a firm believer in, as I have said all along, that the reserve would have to be released, and we should be able to make certain, that ordinary Afghans do not be put in a position where they could be forced to not have adequate food. And I think as an economist, as an Afghan American, I'm deeply concerned about the fate of the 35 million people in Afghanistan who have known little more than war and suffering their whole life. And now for another country to be able to suffocate those particular people, the result will be only new refugee crisis. A new refugee crisis of the kind that we saw in 2014 in Syria, or even worse. So Afghans will flee on foot. They will carry their babies in one hand and whatever their belonging have in another. And they could gather, they will go to Iran in hopes of making it into Turkey and then into Europe. And I think it is a failure to be able to provide this access is not only short-sighted for the United States, but also the final abandonment of the Afghan people. And I think it's very important that the United States, which negotiated evacuation with Taliban, which is negotiating how they could go ahead and attack ISA, can go ahead and engage fully in those activities, but does not want to get fully engaged in releasing these particular funds. You see, these policies of the kind that now are in force, these policies, they never hurt people who they are intended to work. It will not hurt the current government. We know that by evidence in many other areas. And I think it will hurt the ordinary Afghans who deserve to have access to their particular money. They deserve to not have their life saving become worthless because inflation is going to eat the value of their particular money in a blink of an eye. So they deserve to be able to feed their families. So again, that failure to provide access, as I said before, I think is short-sighted. Let's try to act in a way where it indeed help these people who we invested, the United States invested a lot of money, and try to avoid the spiral of price increases in food shortages, in currency depreciation, and bank closures. And let's try to avoid the complete collapse of the economy.
Well, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
We appreciate
Thank you.
this. We will do everything we can to get your message out with our effort and others who are joining with you in trying to prevent this atrocity and to at least make up for the destruction that's been waged against your country over all these years.
Thank you.
So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you, Mike, for all your help and efforts in this area. I'm very appreciative of your dedication to this area, and I'm an optimist. And I think it took a while to get this letter out, but we finally did it. With the meetings almost twice, 3 times a week, or sometimes 4 times with different groups, we got to a level where at least we had 23 today. Hopefully, the number would increase. The goal is I would like to get this letter out before Christmas and before the congressmen disappear, rather than bringing it out in the new year. So we'll try to do that, and we'll keep you apprised of what is going on, and we'll keep in touch. And thanks again very much.
And thank you for your efforts, Dr. Mehrabi.
Thank you.